okay? Being free to do what it is you want to do. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, what race you are, what country you come from. This country is made for everybody to have a chance to be better, okay? And when most people think of that, they think when they're born here or that they come here, that it's about them. It's about going out, executing, and winning. And that's true. It is about you. It is about your journey. It is about building something great for you. But something that's rarely talked about, something that is rarely considered, is something that I literally think about every day. And I think that if you would think about it like I think about it, I think it would help you stay motivated. I think it would help you stay more disciplined. I think it would help you stay sharper. Okay? Those of you who follow me, you know that almost every day I post this big giant American flag that's in my gym. All right? And that flag is actually as big as our first retail store that we opened back in 1999. Now, when I look at that flag, I'm not posting that flag for the people who've been elected in office. I'm not posting that flag for the media who seems to hate our country and hate us. I'm posting that flag for the idea of what this country could be, and the idea of what this country should be, and the idea of what we should be doing to help enrich that soil that makes up this country. I don't see my success and my drive and my businesses and all of these things. I don't see that as a selfish quest. I don't see that as, oh, Andy wants to make this much dollars. That's not how I look at it, dude. Here's how I look at it. I look at it like this. I look at it like this country was made for us to go out and build amazing things. This country was made for us to take care of our communities when we build those amazing things. This country requires people to go out and produce and create so that our economy can flourish and grow and people can have careers. They can buy houses. They can have families. Okay. That's the purpose of growing a company here in America. All right. Now, when we think of, us going out and you think of like achieving your goals and all these things you want to do, it's real easy to get caught up into what you're going to get. Okay. But what I want you to think about is what is your obligation to this country? What are you paying back into the system? Right? Because entrepreneurs and successful people have a duty to build great things. Not just because it creates success for you, not just because it creates wealth for you, but because it provides unlimited opportunities for people to come and build their dreams within your organization. Because it solves real problems on the ground level. Because it makes life better for other Americans. I see that as an obligation. And the biggest obligation I see when I look at that flag, when it comes to being an entrepreneur is, and really just being a citizen of this country, if I'm being completely honest, is this. When I look at that flag, I realize that lots and lots and lots and lots of people have died for this country. And the least that I could do to pay them back is to go out and set a fucking example for what it means to be great in this country.
If you concentrate solely on your career, you can get a long way in your career. And I would say that that's a strategy that a minority of men preferentially do. That's all they do. They work like 70, 80 hours a week. They go flat out on their career. They're staking everything on the small probability of exceptional status in a narrow domain. But it's hard on them. They don't have a life. It's very difficult for them to have a family. It may be that unidimensionality is the price you have to pay to be exceptional at one thing. Right? Because if you're going to be something like a genius level mathematician and you want to do that or a scientist, say, it's like you're in your lab all the time, you're working 70 hours a week or 80 hours a week, you're smart, you're dedicated, you're unidimensional, and that's how you get to beat all the other people who are doing that. It's the only way. But the problem is you don't get a life. Now, if you love being a scientist and you have that kind of focus of mind, well, first of all, you're a rare person, and second, you're going to pay for it. But fine, more power to you. But it's a It's a risky business to do that. You sacrifice a lot for it. And I would say most often, if you're speaking about having a healthy life, that isn't what you do. You spread yourself out more. So, you have a family, you have some things that you do outside of work that are meaningful to you and useful. You have a network of friends, plenty to keep you well-oriented. And then if one of those things collapses, everything doesn't go. Now, the price you pay for that is the more you strive to optimize that balance, the less likely you are to be fantastically successful at any single one of them. But you might have a very, if you consider your life as a whole, that might be a winning strategy. One of the things Carl Jung said, I really liked this. He thought that men went after perfection and women went after wholeness. So they're different value. There's something different at the top of the value hierarchy. So perfection would be stake it all on one thing and look for radical success. Not that all men do that, because they don't, but we're talking about extremes, at least with regards to the men that do that. The wholeness idea is more like, well, I want one thing in my life to be 150%, or I want 5 things in my life to be 80%. Well, there's a lot more richness in a life where you have 5 things operating at 80%, but you're not operating at any of them at 150%. So, and I really believe this because I've watched men and women go through their careers now for a long period of time. And one of the things there's lots of things that produce this, but one of the things that I've noticed is that mostly women in their 30s bail out of unidimensional careers. They won't do them. They won't put in the 80 hours a week that they would have to put in order to dominate that particular area. And it isn't, the reason that they won't do it is because they decide it's not worth it. And no wonder, because why would that be worth it?
You have to get up to go up. Because I know all kind of people, they're still in bed. You know what I mean? They're still in bed. They haven't realized, you probably ought to get out of bed before you can be successful. You got to get up to go up. That's step number 1, get out of bed. Enter in the arena of action. Take some initiative. Do something. Okay, you got to get up to go up. And after you get up to go up, after you do that, secondly, you got to grow up. You got to grow up. I know people who have never matured. They're still talking about the same thing, doing the same thing. They've never developed like to. So if you want to get to the top, you don't have to get up to go up. You got to grow up to go up. And then in the tape, I remember I talked thirdly in the leadership lesson about, well, you got to give up to go up. And that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment. And then the last thing I said is you need to gather up to grow up. You need to get your team together. If you really want to go to the top, you've got to gather up people because as I teach in the laws of teamwork, law number 4, the law of Mount Everest says, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. In other words, you've got to get a team around you and you've got to get that team helping you to get to the top. So let's talk about the law of sacrifice. A few years ago, there was a tragedy at Mount Everest where a couple of guides got into a storm with a few of their people, and there were a few deaths. And I can remember a 60-minute interview that I watched. It's a very interesting interview because they were talking to one of the guides who, of course, lived, and they were talking about the tragedy. I think it was Mike Wallace, if I'm not mistaken, in that interview, and he asked a couple of questions that especially arrested my attention. One of the questions he asked was, why do you risk your life to take people to the top? And I remember the guide said, well, it's because that's my job. My job is to take people to the top. That's why they call me a guide. And Mike Wallace says, well, couldn't you get to the top by yourself without harm or injury? And oh, yes, I could do that. But it's my job to take people to the top. It's our job as leaders to take people to the top. Mike Wallace continued that interview, and then he looked at me and said, I don't think it's worth the risk. I mean, after all, to risk your life or have people in your party that not make it to the top, he said, I don't think it's worth the risk. And then he looked at the guy and said, why do you risk your life to get to the top of the mountain? And I'll never forget, that guide looked at him, and when Mike Wallace asked that question, the guide is looking into his face like, I can't believe you would ask me that question. Why do I risk my life to get to the top? He looked at Mike Wallace and said, it's obvious to me that you've never been to the top of Mount Everest. It's obvious to me. You've never been to the top of the mountain. It's obvious that you've never been there. If you would have ever been to the top, you would never ask that question. When I think of that interview, I think of leaders. Once we have been to the top and see how glorious it is, what do we want to do? We want to go back down and we want to find some other people and say, I want you to take a trip with me. I'm going to show you things you have never seen. I'm going to give you experiences that you have never experienced. That's what leaders do. Leaders have been to the top, and they want to take as many people with them to the top as they possibly can. Now, here's what I want you to understand. To get to the top, you've got to give up something. It was Emerson who said, for everything you gain, you must lose something.